Mr. Because now I'm aware of the fact that I've been mispronouncing your name forever. Kalishan. Okay. So I know Mr. Callahan.
Or that.
Lindsay's dad grew up in communist Poland, and so he has graciously put together a whole set of slides. He's got a lot of family stories, the story of his uncle, the story
Oh,
of...
you gave it away.
No, you got it.
Wow.
He's got an uncle. What has a story?
He has parents.
At any rate, please welcome.
Thanks, guys. So, Mr. Finch, thank you so much for letting me share my experiences growing up with these guys. Hey, guys. So, as she said, I'm Han Pablo Kalisha, or Mr. Paul Calazan in English. So I do have an ask. You guys all have read Animal Farm, right? So as I go through some of these stories and some of the experiences, I do want you guys to kind of draw parallels between the book and what I'm talking to you guys about, right? So just kind of think about it. Maybe, I don't know, if you guys want to shout it out, be like, ooh, that's when blah, blah, blah happened, right? So, yeah, but definitely keep open mind. So let's learn some Polish while we're here, huh? Make this fun. So Polish is super duper easy. You basically pronounce every letter, right? Don't skip any letters. Well, I take that back, because your SZ is a sh, like in my last name, right? You have your ch, your z, and your h, right? So we have additional letters. We have 32. We like our little hook and doodads on our letters. So this, like a normal A would be an A. This is an on, ch, and what, u, sh, j, and j. Right? So we have like three. We love our Z's, right? You guys notice that we have a regular Z, then we have the j, then we have the j, then we have the j sound. Love them. Okay, so we don't use Q, X, or V. Just like in my name, right? So the W makes the V sound. We would just spell those out phonetically. And you have to roll your R's. R's. Right? Anybody can roll? Oh gosh, I can't do them after lunch. Can you roll them? Try it. Okay, you guys ready to try a word? So this isn't really a word. This is a name of a character on a hysterical movie about World War II. Anybody? Not my kids. Anybody brave enough besides Lindsay and Lucas? Try it.
Yeah, I'm not.
All right, Lindsay, Lucas, how do you say this? Right, Grzegorz and Czyszczykiewicz, right? So you literally pronounce this every letter, right? That sh is a sh sound, right? You have to say Czyszczykiewicz, right? Easy. Okay, so this is Poland. You guys, everybody knows where Poland is? Eastern Europe-ish, right? This is my hometown. Anybody want to try to pronounce that? You got that double sh sound again? Bydgoszcz. So this is where I'm from. Bydgoszcz is where I'm from. Toruń. I was just talking about Sebastian. Sebastian was just in Toruń last year. Poznań. I do want to highlight Poznań here because I will make some references to Poznań. Anybody want to try this one? I love how you Americans say this. Lots? Yeah, there you go. Łódź. Right? You got your w and a u, the j, łódź. Right? But hey, good try. All right. And then Poland is about the size of New Mexico. All right. So I want to talk to you guys about what was happening in the world that made communism seem appealing. Right? Again, I'm not saying communism was good. Don't go home and say, hey, this guy was telling us about how great communism is. I'm not saying that. I just wanted to put it in perspective what was happening in the world that made it seem appealing. Right? So what happened on this date? It was in the U.S. Well, colonies. American Revolution, right? The American Revolution started. Why did it start? Oversimplified reason. Go. Yell it out.
British were taxes.
Taxes.
British were terrorists.
Right? These guys were sitting around Boston Harbor having a tea party, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, these tariffs, right? They're rubbish. Let's start a revolution, right? So yeah, exactly. And then so what happened? And this is in Europe. What happened on May 8, 1789? French Revolution, right? The French were like, we're tired of eating cake. We just want our baguettes. That's a joke, right? Remember the whole Marie Antoinette let them eat cake? Okay. Anyway, so right, it was again, and France was broke, right? They had just paid for a whole revolution in the U.S., so they rebelled, right? Okay. So this, you guys will not know what it is. This is actually King Stanisław, which is the king of Poland at the time, and he actually just signed the Polish Constitution. First constitution in Europe, second constitution in the world, obviously after U.S. right? This was a constitutional monarchy. It introduced, like I said, constitutional monarchy and political equality in Poland, right? This was such a big deal that King Stanisław came, or King Jan Sobieski came out of the grave from 100 years ago to carry King Stanisław on his shoulders. Another joke, right? Anyway. Yeah, so it was, but what, I mean, think about what was happening at the time. Reign of Terror, right? People in France were having dates with Madame Guillotine, right? So the monarchs and the nobles were like, oh no, this is gonna happen to us, right? Like, how do we feel about this constitutional monarchy? So there was some rebellion, right? Nationalist rebellion. So we were surrounded, this is Poland at the time, in 1795, so we were surrounded by Russian Empire, Prussian Empire, and Austrian Empire, and they're like, you know what? You guys can't handle your infighting, we'll go ahead and step in and take care of it. So voila, Poland is gone, right? Prussia moved in, Russia moved in, and then Austria got kind of the scraps. So Poland ceased to exist for 123 years until the end of World War I. Yeah, so we couldn't take care of our problems, so the other people did. So while we were fighting, what is the picture? What does this represent? Go ahead, shut up. Yeah, Industrial Revolution, right? We had factories, people were working 25-hour days, right? 8 days a week, right? For minimum wage. Rich were getting richer, poor were getting poorer, right? So then this guy came along. You guys know who this is?
Karl Marx.
Karl Marx, right? And what did he do? Right? And actually, I actually bought the book just for this, but it's not really a book, it's more of a pamphlet. But anyway, so yeah, so he basically proposed a society where everybody gets equal share of the pie, right? No class, right? No class. It sounded great, right? We don't have monarchy, we don't have to, be told what to do, we get equal rights. On paper, it sounded pretty fantastic, right? Right. And by the way, he never actually wrote how to implement it, right? He just kind of had a theory, right? So he never actually went so far as to be like, this is how we need to implement, this is what government structure would look like, right? So he just had some ideas. And there was another guy that wrote it, but whatever, insignificant. Okay, so what was happening in the world at that time? World War I, right? So who was fighting World War I? Do you think it was who were the officers, right? The officers that were the nobility, right? They weren't in the trenches, right? They were out there, go kill each other, go for love of country, right? And these guys were like, we're tired of fighting, right? Why are we fighting? So in early March of 1917, we had the Russian Revolution, right? They basically said, we're done. So about a week later, King Tsar II, you guys remember this guy? Remember Anastasia off the cartoon? Anyway, so about a week later, he abdicates, right? And then subsequently, his whole family is executed. So about a month later, in April of 1917, who's this? Lenin. Comrade Lenin. Comrade Lenin comes back from exile. So he's been in exile for a while because he was, speaking about communism and he trained kind of in different parts of the world. So he comes back from exile and he's like, I'll take care of this, I'll lead the Bolsheviks, right? And by the way, when he was 17 in 1887, he watched his older brother, get executed by the Tsar for a foiled assassination attempt on Tsar Alexander III. So, do you think he liked the monarchy very much?
No.
Right? He's like, yeah, exactly. So, part of me thinks, he's the one that really pushed for the execution of Tsar Nicholas II. Just my theory. But anyway, so end of the war, Poland's back, yay! So it is a little different than it is now because what I showed you guys earlier is actually post-World War II. So just to clarify, though, Poland was not communist at the time, right? Poland didn't become communist till after World War II, after Stalin saved the world. So anyway, we're back. Okay, who's this guy? He was a great guy, right?
Yeah.
Right, he ruled by tyranny. So this guy was a thug, right? This guy, you know who this guy is?
Xi Jinping.
Close, Nikita Khrushchev. Nikita Khrushchev, he actually only had 4 years of schooling, official schooling. He could read, but nobody knows if he could write or not. He was never seen writing. He was always had note takers, right? But ironically, he's the one that actually pushed for education. Do you guys know what he's known for, like among Americans? He had an interaction with JFK, 1962. You guys just learned about it. Come on, you're embarrassing this lady. Cuban Missile Crisis, yes. Now, he was actually deposed in 64, I believe. He was not killed. I don't know how he managed to save himself, but he was not killed. If I had been under Lenin, he would have been dead, right? Anyway, this guy's next. You guys know this guy? Leonid Brezhnev?
We did see a picture of Leonid Brezhnev shaking hands with
Carter.
No.
Is it Carter? No, Nixon. Hillary Nixon.
Nixon.
They call them eyebrows. No, I'm joking. and then Gorbachev, right? We always had the joke that a pigeon like this sitting above his head. Anyway, there were two other guys in between these two, but they were older and kind of insignificant. All right. So this is what Europe looked like during the Cold War, right? You got the Iron Curtain. Just to clarify, it was not a physical Iron Curtain. This is just what it was called. And I remember there was the Berlin Wall around Berlin. However, it did kind of in the mid '80s when the communism started to fall. This was definitely heavily patrolled, right? Yugoslavia, which is now like Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, all that. They were communists, but they were not technically part of the Eastern Bloc. I'm stalling here because I want somebody to point out the mistake on this. Anybody?
There's like a red.
Well, it's backwards, right? And I left this intentionally in there because fact check everything. Just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's true, right? So this was obviously a mistake, but I intentionally left it. Where's Iceland? Iceland's like up here. They were neutral. Nothing happens in Iceland except for Eurovision. Okay, you guys understand that? Eurovision? Yeah, she's ready for me to start singing. Okay, so here's some things that I want to talk to you about in Poland. Housing. It looks fantastic, right? Just like U.S. suburbia, right? Well, that's because this is U.S. suburbia. This is what communist countries tend to look like. So you have these lovely, lovely brown buildings, multi-stories. And why? Right? Think about why. Like, no, okay. No, Ethan, you're supposed to be in another class. Yeah, why did they live like this? Do you know? Well, there was so there was centralization of agriculture, right? So everything, all the land and everything was kind of taken, and you're like, why am I working? I'm going to go move into the town. And people were actually encouraged to move in town, but there was a housing shortage. So people like lived in these little like buildings like this, like multi-families, multi-generation. So I mean, you had like multi-families in a single room. So then Khrushchev came along in the 60s. He really pushed for this just basically housing projects, right? So they built these off-sites and like slabs and then kind of assembled them together. Now, there's a theory. So when multi-generations lived in these little houses, you wouldn't really share. You would be like, oh, that Brezhnev, that Khrushchev, he's horrible, right? You keep your mouth shut. But when people started living independently in their own houses, people started to talk more, right? Because it was hard, it was easy to keep track on 40, 50 people living in this house versus hundreds and thousands of people living in this house, right? I mean, the KGB and Soviet state couldn't just bug every single house, right? So there's a theory that says that through housing, it kind of spread dissidence, if you will, right? Does that make sense? And by the way, this is my hometown. I grew up in one of these buildings back in here. This is just another picture of it. I used to run up and down with my sister up these stairs. My building's actually over here. And this is just to give you an idea what these houses look like. So they were pods, right? So if you see like entryways like right there, so those entryways were centralized around each of these pods, right? Each pod was like around an elevator shaft, and this isn't just one dwelling unit, right? These are 4 dwelling units, right? So you got a kitchen, you got a room, you got another room, you got a bathroom. This poor bloke just has 1 room, right? And when I say room, I don't mean bedroom, I mean room, right? It serves every function. So like the house I grew up in was similar to this. So this room would have been my parents' room, bedroom, our living room, our dining room, our hangout room. And my parents slept on a sofa that would then turn into a bed, like a sofa sleeper type of thing. And then my sister and I would have shared something like this. So this is the actual building I grew up in. At the time, it was gray and gross. Since then, they've threw like styrofoam insulation on it and painted it. So I lived up here. This was our balcony right here. This is my sister and I shared this room, and this is the kitchen. So yeah, that's where we grew up. All right, cars. We had muscle cars like you wouldn't believe. Just kidding. This is what our cars look like, right? This is actually the kind of car my family had. It's called the Syrenka or Syrena. It was a Polish production, and this is actually a picture of the railway station right outside, right in my hometown. So yeah, so get an idea of the cars, right? We didn't have the station wagons, the muscle cars. And my all-time favorite is the Fiat 126P. Where was the Fiat produced? Italy, right? Except for the 126P, P indicating that it was a Polish production. So to get an idea, so I left these people in here for reference, but just for a better reference, I could sit in this car as an adult with my shoulder touching the window, and I could put my hand flat on the other side. And we used to get like 5, 6 people in these things. It is the original clown car. And it did have a rear mounted motor, 26 horsepower. But they were fun to drive. They were fun to drive. I've actually driven these on trips back. Super fun. Okay. Knockoff goods, right? You guys know what off-branding is?
Yeah.
Right? You know, where you get, you think you're getting, right? So, like to this day, when I have family living out from Poland, they're like, where's the Levi outlet stores, right? Because they want to get their Levi's. How do they say it? Levi's. How do they say it? How do they say it? I forgot. Anyway, so they're like all about the brands, right? Because even now they're still expensive. But back then we didn't have the branded stuff, right? It was all knockoff. And brides, right? So the other thing about the knockoffs was there was also a lot of black market activity, right? So brides. Let me talk to you about brides. So when I was about 7 years old, a little over 7, my grandmother and I went into the police station to pick up our passports. My sister and I were leaving. I'll get to that later. But we were supposed to pick up our passports. We were notified that the passports were ready to be picked up. So my grandmother and I sat down at this desk in front of this commissioner or whatever he was. He's like, ma'am, I don't know what to tell you. You know, passports aren't here. She's like, but we were told, blah, blah, blah. So this went on for a few minutes, and then my grandma reached down into her purse, pulled out an envelope, slid it across the desk. The guy examined the contents, and miraculously the passports appeared. So, you know, that's how things were done back then. Sometimes still now, right? But anyway, okay, so grocery store, right? Pretty amazing grocery store, right? Costco of the 70s. Well, this is not what our stores look like. This is more of what our stores look like. So, and I don't want to say we didn't have food, it's just all of it was shipped back to the Soviet states, right? Communist countries, or Russia. So think about Snowball and Napoleon, right? Remember like Napoleon, he's like having beer, popping, you know, throwing back a cold one while everyone's starving. That was how it was that's how it was, right? If you were in the Soviet party, if you were in a communist party, and you were way up there, like you had access to everything. For instance, we had a friend who's Russian, grew up in Moscow. Her dad was a physicist for the University of Moscow. She came to a dinner party, like a Christmas party or something. And my parents and my uncle had just met them, so they were kind of comparing notes, right? So she was a little bit younger than I am. So she experienced the fall of communism in '91, and she talked about how great it was during communism, how they had caviar for breakfast, and after communism fell, they had nothing. I kid you not, I thought my mom was gonna strangle this lady right there, right? Like, you know, because we lived through this, and she's talking about how great it was, actually caviar for breakfast, right? So again, it's not that it wasn't there, it wasn't there for us, right? So we had ration cards. So everybody, and actually a gentleman asked a question earlier, do we buy things with the ration card? No, you still have to pay. But these ration cards give you access to it, right? So for instance, Monka is flour, Tsukeki is candy. I did ask my parents what a zerva was, and they couldn't remember. But like here's mienzo, which is meat, so 600 grams. So 600 grams, math genius, 600 grams, how many pounds is that?
I give up.
Actually, I was pointing at Johnny Walker.
Johnny.
But it's all right, Ethan. Johnny, what's 600 grams? How many pounds is that? It's roughly a pound, right? Oh, come on, Johnny. It's a small pitch even.
Leslie, you got the answer to
Anyway,
that?
anyway, so you got these cards based on members of the family, right? So my favorite one is this. You guys can pretty much figure out what that is, right? Alcohol and papiros are cigarettes. So now, if you did, for instance, if I didn't smoke or drink, I could theoretically trade this with my neighbor for maybe some candy, right? Now again, you were like, so this is from 1982, right? So you would have got, so this is November of '82, so you would have gotten one of these, I think per family member, but I'm not sure. So anyway, there was a shortage, right? So everywhere you went, there were lines. And if you saw a line, you got in it. It didn't matter what you were getting, but you know what's better than what you had, and that was nothing, right? So I've done my fair share of line standing. Ask my kids, ask my wife, I do not do lines. I'm like, I'll see you when you get to the front, right? I just don't do it anymore. So the ongoing joke is, and I'll let you do this for yourself. All right. Moving right on. So again, food, right? We had to be creative with our food, and because it's not that it wasn't there, it was just not available to us. So Ozorola is my first one I'm going to talk about. Can you guys guess what this is? What is it? Yes. Are you Polish?
Wait,
How
what is
did
it?
you know that?
David can't have Cowtown.
So anyway, so this is Cowtown. So these are pretty much identical, except this one has a little beef blood put into it. Personally, I like this one better than this one, but you notice the gelatinous goo, and I'll come back to gelatinous goo. What is this?
Right. No, it's not.
No, it's actually more closely resembles throw up. But no, this is called smollet. So basically, you know when you cook bacon and then you let the grease sit and coagulate?
Oh,
It's lard essentially, right? So it's basically just bacon grease. Then you cut up like chunks of bacon into it, and you put it on your sausage and eat it with a pickle, or put it on your bread, eat it with a pickle. I don't know. My parents love it. I don't eat the junk. Anyway, back to gelatinous goose. This is actually my wife's favorite dish. Joking. So it's basically just meat. You got some egg in here. You got some vegetables, right? You have it in its gelatinous goo. You eat it with like vinegar or lemon juice. It's actually pretty delicious. So why gelatin? You guys know what gelatin, where it comes from? What? Mad cow. It doesn't necessarily have to be mad cows, right? I mean, they're dead, so they might be mad because they're dead. But it's actually connective tissue, right? So after you take a cow, you butcher it, you take all the luxury, the eyeballs, the brains, no, I'm kidding, the fillets, the steaks, right? You send them off to package to the Soviet Union and to the party members. What do you have left? You have just a carcass, right? You have bones, connective tissue, and skin. So you boil that down, you get gelatin. And it is actually very, very nutritious. And again, I know you guys, anyway, one of the girls the other, I kid you not, she was like gagging when I was talking about it. Zoe was gagging about it, right? I'm like, poor girl, like, good thing she got lunch.
I have to smell this every day.
Right, but this is very nutritious, right? Like, think about it.
And
Beggars, and cheap, right? And beggars can't be choosers, right? So that's why I call this culinary creativity. You have to get creative with food. And my all-time favorite? Flocky. So flocky literally translates to guts or intestines. Can you guys guess what this is?
Cow stomach.
Cow stomach. It's tripe. Lucas and I, so Lucas, if you guys don't know Lucas, Lindsay's little brother, we actually love this stuff. My mom still makes it, and we actually request like dibs, like extra for us, because we actually do enjoy it. You put it's in a broth, so it actually doesn't taste. I mean, I like it. Okay. The other thing, you guys remember COVID?
Oh, yeah.
You guys remember the toilet paper shortage?
Oh, yeah.
That was our life, right? Except when we got it on these necklaces, right, with the string on it. And I kid you not, if you saw a guy with one of these or a lady sporting one of these, you ran up, asked where you got it, and you ran like hell to see if you can get some hand on your toilet paper. Right. Okay, education. So good thing about education, again, remember Nikita Khrushchev is the one that really pushed for literacy. So it was free education, starting in preschool all the way up to university level, including trade schools. You guys know what trade schools are?
Right.
Cool. All right, so the bad part is Russian was mandatory. I was only there for first grade. I didn't have to learn it. I think it started in third grade. So the other bad part is that it was all led by the Soviet state. So the Soviet state dictated what was taught. So it was all about glorification of communism, glorification of Stalin, of Lenin, right? The fathers of the Soviet Union. So do you guys remember so this is supposed to be the Russian Revolution. And do you guys remember how this guy showed up like a month late to the party? Well, he painted himself back in, right? And so that's what they did, right? They, remember Snowball? Snowball was a hero, and all of a sudden he wasn't the hero, right? So there was definitely manipulation of history and really taught what they wanted you to teach. Right, so again, same thing. Here's Comrade Lenin, or Stalin. Here's Stalin and Lenin. All right, anybody know what this is? A picture of D-Day. Exactly. What happened on D-Day?
Invasion of Northern France.
So you say, if you were in the Soviet Union, you didn't even learn about this, right? Because Stalin was the great hero that saved the world from Hitler. And you guys don't really. I don't know how much you guys get, because Mrs. Hitch brought this up. Like, in all fairness, I don't know how much you guys know about, because Stalin did, right? He came in from the east, but anyway. So according to Stalin, it was this never happened. Okay, so let's talk religion. So religion, I do want to spend some time on religion because I do feel primarily religion and what happened with Poland and religion. That was really truly the downfall of communism, right? So Poland was 90 to 98% Catholic. Kind of think about why it was so heavily Catholic. Because 20 years before that, 30 years before that, it was World War II, right? So Jews were massacred or basically exiled, right? So the only people that were left were the Catholics. And we hated the Protestants to the east and the Eastern Orthodox, or sorry, Protestants to the west and the Russian Orthodox to the east, right? So that is the one thing that really gelled us, was the faith and being Polish, right? All those years that Poland didn't exist. And if you actually look at Poland over the years, I mean, it was like tiny and huge and right? So that's really what gelled people, was just that fact that we were Polish and we were Catholic. Okay, so there was a lot of persecution. So even though Catholicism was an outright ban, right, there was a lot of persecution, right? So church property was stolen, church priests were harassed, public gatherings, public worship, public masses, they were all outlawed, right? So none of that was happening. In fact, I remember stories of like people coming out of church getting blasted by water cannons. Tried to find some pictures, I could not. Okay, so this poor guy, can you guys say his name? So it's Ksiądz, because remember the Ksiądz? So Ksiądz just means father or priest, right? Jerzy Popiełuszko. So this poor guy was actually abducted and beaten to death by the secret police in 1984. Kind of later when things got really bad. Okay, so this is my picture of my parents' 2 weddings. Yes, they had 2 weddings. And the reason being is that weddings in a church were not recognized by the state, right? You had to have a civil wedding, you got all the paperwork, the formalities done, and then if you wanted to, you could do another wedding in the church. So, yeah, so usually, most people usually have 2 weddings. Do you know who this guy is? It actually says right there. But. So anyway, so October 16, 1979, you guys know how to say it. I love the way Americans say this name, by the way. It's Karol, right? Karol. So Karol Wojtyła becomes John Paul II, right? So he becomes Pope. He's the first Polish Pope and the first non-Italian Pope in about 450 years. Being a Catholic country, what do you think it did for Polish people? Right? It invigorated them, right? They're like, God's on our side now, right? We're going to conquer everything. So I truly believe, well, I'll get to it. So remember how I was talking about no public gatherings? So this is the public gathering that was outlawed in 1979 when the Pope came to visit Poland. So, and think about what, like, the fact that, you know, the Soviet state couldn't do anything about this, right? Like, this just energized you. That just fueled it that much more. So this is just another picture of the gathering with the Pope. Okay, so shortly after, in August of 1980, we have this group come together. It's called Solidarność, I know it's hard to read, or Solidarity in English. So it is the independent, self-governing trade union. And I know you guys were picking that up because I was pointing it out. But in reality, so it was, on paper, it was a trade union really to fight for workers' rights, right? But in reality, it was anti-authoritarian social movement, right? So it was basically, they spoke out against communism, they fought against communism. And just to give you an idea of numbers, so they started in August of 1980. By September of 1981, they had 10 million registered members. And 10 million doesn't sound a lot, like in a country like US, but in Poland had a population of about 35 million at that time. So 1 out of 3 to 5 people, or 3 to 4 people were involved in this, right? So they were definitely gaining traction. So this guy, this is not Robin Williams from the original Jumanji movie. This guy is Lech Wałęsa. He was the leader, the founder of the Solidarity movement there with the Pope. And I believe along with Ronald Reagan, those 2 guys plus Ronald Reagan were instrumental in the downfall of communism. Okay, so in May of 1981, there was an assassination attempt on the Pope. And we'll never know the true reason for it, right? But as far as anybody in Poland was concerned, it was the KGB and the Soviets that were behind it, right? So that just fired up everybody even more, right? So that led to just more protests, more strikes, right? This is Gdańsk, so that's kind of up north area. So in December of 1981, martial law was declared. You guys know what martial law is?
Where the government takes rule over the country using the military?
Military, right, exactly. So, you know, curfews, house arrest essentially for everyone. So what they did was they actually rounded up the leaders of Solidarity. And when I say rounded up, I mean they just banged down your door and dragged you out, right? So, this is what we woke up to. Tanks in the streets, protests, curfew, borders were, like, towns were shut down, right? So my mom's parents lived in the next town over. We couldn't leave without permission, right? So there were barriers up, and you couldn't leave to go see people in the next town over without permission from the police. Well, it was militia. Okay. So this gentleman here was one of the detainees, one of the guys that was rounded up that night. You guys want to give this kid's name a go? You right on. No, Jacek Szynakewicz. Okay. So who is this guy, right? And this is what you gave away, right? So he's actually my uncle. You saw that hair earlier in my slides next to my mom. I actually will have the same hair if I don't comb it over. I actually threatened my kids I was going to come with that same hairstyle today. They begged me not to. But so not only was he my uncle, but he was actually one of the founding members of Solidarity in Poznan. Remember I kind of pointed that out early. So here he is, you can see the hair, right? So this picture was taken in 1981 in July, and in June this monument was erected in commemoration in 1956 in Poznan. There was another attempted uprising where basically military tanks and everybody moved in, and about 200 people had died. So this was a monument built to commemorate that event. And he was, and I actually asked him, I said, how'd you get away with that? He didn't care what he was doing, right? Because right at this time, right, so this is July 1981, so this is prior to the roundup. You think about all the gatherings, think about, the priests, think about the Pope, right? So they got to do what they want. So that's why the roundup happened, right? They were like, enough, we're shutting this party down, right? So not only was he a founding member in that, but he was a bit of a secret agent man, right? He actually worked for a company out of Moscow, where I think they processed, remember, it was like processing soy into oil or soy sauce, I can't remember what he said. So he would travel to Moscow about every quarter or so. So his main office was in Warsaw. He lived in Poznan. And so actually, like that summer, his boss pulled him into the office, and he's like, "Hey, you gotta chill. You gotta kind of lay low because you're on KGB's list, right?" So in September of 1981, he actually got rounded up. He got picked up at the Moscow airport. And they detained him. Now, he had on him just a bunch of documents about Solidarność, about his pamphlets, and, just trying to get people riled up about fighting communism. So he did transport this in documents. They did hold him, released him afterwards. He subsequently met up with his contacts, and I was like, don't you think they did that on purpose to follow? He's like, yeah, now I know that. But back then, these guys weren't trained spies. Jason Bourne, what's the guy's name? Jason Bourne, whatever, right? James Bond, whatever, right? They didn't do that. They were just trying to save their country, right? So he did get picked up by KGB. And then prior to the roundup in December, he already knew about it. So we had another uncle who was a military lieutenant general who caught wind of this. So he did actually meet with my uncle and say, hey, lay low. There's going to be something big happening. So that night, he did get home. From a dinner party, and later that night they banged on his door and rounded him up. So he was detained for quite some time. So anyway, so people thought, they thought that they were going to suppress activity, right? They thought that they were going to scare him enough. And actually, I did ask my class, were you concerned that they were going to kill you? Because they put him in the back of like an army truck, right? And they just drove for hours. He said, yeah, we stopped in the woods somewhere. They let us to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, did you not think they were going to shoot you in the back of the head as you were going to the bathroom? He's like, not really, because there wasn't a whole lot of violence yet. So he's like, I was pretty confident that they were going to hurt us. So, but anyway, so they did try that scare tactic, right, to really suppress striking and all that. Yeah, so kind of because I know we're short on time. So he did end up getting.
We have about 10 minutes.
Oh, we have 10 minutes?
Yeah,
Okay.
we go until 10 now.
Okay, so there was all this strike. Yeah, so it didn't work, right? It kind of backfired. It just made people more angry, right? So there was more protest. So he did end up getting released. He was exiled. So the conditions of his release were him agreeing to leave the country, right? So they basically held him until. So we didn't know where he was at for about 2 months. We didn't know if he was alive. But then word did get out that he was still alive, and he made the decision in March of 1982 to say, look, I'll sign whatever you want me to. I'm done. Right, just release me. Other people stayed longer, but yeah. So part of the condition of his release was the agreement to be exiled. So that's my cousin here. My two cousins, my aunt and uncle. So they live in the States here now. In fact, this guy is your neighbor. Rebecca was asking me about it. He just lives right up the street from me.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So in 1982 he left. So then my parents left in 84. So this is my mama here, my dad here. So they left in January of 1984. to help my aunt who was then about to have a baby as just tourists, right? My dad had absolutely zero intention of coming back. My mom, as far as she was concerned, she's gonna be back, to see her kids and see her family in a couple weeks. My dad and my aunt stole her passport and they filed it with the American Embassy for political asylum. All right, so then they went through the whole immigration process, and then my sister and I joined them later in June. And I will tell you a story of when we were riding the train leaving East Germany. So we got stopped at the border and Stasi. Do you guys know what East German Stasi was?
Yeah.
Right, the military, roots, right? Is your dad the guy that was worked in Eastern Europe? Is that your dad? Oh, okay. Okay, so Stasi, right? East German police, essentially, right? So they're on there with machine guns, right? So it's me and my sister and my grandma in our little overnight traveler in the train. And I remember sitting on the top bunk, and these guys are like with these guns to my grandma, right? Like yelling at her because she only had one list of all our possessions. And it's not like we were transporting stereos or anything like that, because we were transporting socks and underwear, right? And they were yelling that they needed a list to take with them, right? And this was all in German, of course. My grandmother did speak German just from World War II. So I remember her like finding just any old piece of paper, and I think she found a napkin or something, to start transcribing, just so she can provide a list to the Stasi. And they never came back, right? Next thing we know, the train's moving and going on. So we did live in Germany for a while, and then moved to the States in August of 1984, and been here ever since. So this is my presentation. I do want to leave you with one last thought, kind of as I was reading and kind of researching some of the history and stuff. So this is just kind of a thought I want to leave you with. I am amazed and horrified and disheartened by how quickly man will abandon his human nature, which I believe to be mostly good, and resort to unspeakable evil and violence against their fellow man in the name of self-righteousness, whether motivated politically, through religion, social economics, or mere lust for absolute power. Yeah, so be vigilant. Be young guys, right? As you grow up and face the world, be vigilant. Okay, any questions? Nothing? I had a question about TV last class. So we did have TVs. They were in black and white. It was maybe like 2 channels, and then they would go off air, I think at 7 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night. Yes?
You were talking about how you guys got info that your passports were done. Did you have phones to do that, or did you have?
Yeah, so we did have phones, but do you guys are probably old enough to remember, what was it, party lines? Do you remember party lines? Back like when you had phones in rural areas in the US, so you would share a phone number with like multiple houses, right? So it was more like that, right? And we did have phones, but to make out of the country calls, you had to arrange it with the police, and you could actually you could hear the clip when they were coming in to join your call to listen, right? When you were talking to somebody out of the country. And I remember when my parents were living in Germany, and they were calling my grandparents to say, hey, we're not coming back, we're gonna go ahead and, file for political asylum and move to Germany, all that was. So you have to really kind of be careful how you say things, right? So you were being, I don't know about if you called your neighbor, but definitely when you were doing those international calls, they were listening. And you could hear the click. Like I remember my parents telling, their tone would change because they could hear the click when someone jumping on the line. Yeah.
You said that's what?
Actually, I did. I was running one day and I'm just like, how do I sum this up? So, so it's kind of what I recommend. I was gonna tell you guys, oh, it's a wise man who's unknown, and then, throw my name up there. But no, literally it was my wife and I were running, and I'm just like, how do I end this? And yeah, I mean, it's disturbing what man will do to one another, right? And you guys saw it through World War II.
What side of Germany did you guys live in?
So, Germany's we were right between Frankfurt and Fulda. It's a little town called Bad Soden-Salzmünster. So that's where we. So when you filed for political asylum, so my parents lived in a immigration camp outside of Frankfurt for a while. But then because you have in your time, they got big background checks on you and everything, make sure you're not Russian spies or whatever, right? So they lived there for a while, and then when my sister and I joined, then they put them up in housing in Bad Soden-Salzmünster for about 2 months, just waiting for our documents to get through, so we can come to the U.S. And literally the next day, we went to an office and we picked up our green cards, which ironically were pink at the time. I don't know if they look like that. But... Yes, Piper.
Did your parents leave at a different time than you guys did?
Yeah, so my parents left in January. Again, because as far as my mom was concerned, she was just gonna go help her sister with, she just had a, I can't remember if my cousin David was born yet. But yeah, they just went for a visit. In fact, my mom
And they just
swore
went to
to us.
Germany.
They went to Germany, to
West Germany.
West Germany, to that Bad Salzwedel area. And yeah, and my dad had zero intention to come back. In fact, in 1981, when martial law broke out, I remember, so when my other uncles, my dad and my other uncle, they were ready to like jump the border and go to West Germany to work. So I remember sitting in our little bathroom crying and saying, please don't, you know. And then that night, martial law was declared, so my dad ended up leaving because he had every intention to leave back in '81, but then all borders were shut down, so he couldn't leave. But yeah, they left in January, and then my sister and I ended up with them in June after they did the whole immigration process with the U.S. immigrant here. Yeah. Yeah, so I've never been to East Berlin or West Berlin. I mean, I've been to Berlin since the wall fell, but I don't remember going through. I remember just kind of leaving East Germany as we were going into West Germany with the Stasi. Yeah.
Did you have any Polish games back, or what type of Polish games did you play?
You know, well, we played a lot of cards. I remember playing a lot of cards with my grandfather. I don't remember a lot of board games, just a lot of cards. And yeah, I mean, you ever how like you see pictures from the 1800s where the guy's got a stick and a wheel, and he's just like that was us, right? Like we didn't have a whole lot of games. In fact, when I moved to Germany, I turned 8 and I got my first like toy. I went to these stores and I picked up this remote control Jeep, and that's what I got for my birthday when I turned 8 in West Germany. I was like, the best thing ever. Yes.
Wasn't there that game Labyrinth? Isn't that a Polish?
Well, that's your cousins brought that recently. That's that. I don't remember a whole lot of board games at the time. I mean, again, card games, but I don't remember board games. But yeah, we played outside all day. Right? Like I remember. Oh yeah, well, hey, I mean, we didn't have a whole lot, right? Like, yeah, we just played hopscotch. Played soccer. We didn't have football. We had football, not football. We did that.
One last question?
Last question? Yes.
Did the Polish ever have like religious days just for like Poland?
So I'm glad you asked, because May 1st is Labor Day, right, in Europe. And it actually started as a communist holiday. And you guys remember the part about being like the mandate for spontaneous parades in the book? You guys remember that part?
Mm.
Right, mandate for spontaneous, right?
In
So,
Animal Farm, yeah.
Right, the Animal Farm. So we actually had, so thanks for asking that, we had that, right? So like if you were, like you were mandated to go to the spontaneous parade, right? So then what the Catholics did, and I think it was Pope Leo VI in the 60s, is he changed May 1st from Labor Day to, I believe it's Feast Day of Saint Joseph the Worker, right? So then the Catholics could be like, hey, we're out here, but we're really out here for Jesus and not for the communists, right? So yeah, so we did have, but they were more sneaky about it.
Isn't there also a national holiday for kids?
Oh yeah, there's a Dzień which is Day of the Other Kids, right? Like kids, I think it's in June sometime,
Yeah,
June 16th maybe. Yeah. Then there was like a Women's Day. There was I had like not only just Mother's Day, but like Ladies' Day, right?
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much.